Hello YouTube, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful week so far. Today I wanted to cover in detail something I've been talking about quite a lot recently, and it's around the concept of body recomposition. So if you've seen my Instagram or you've seen any of my content really for the last couple of years, you might already know that I call myself a body composition coach. And I just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into what that actually means and what that concept of changing your body composition actually looks like in practice. So this is going to be relevant to you if you're someone who's ever had a goal that sounds like, I just want to look a bit leaner and more toned. I don't necessarily want to be kind of skinny or bulky. So with that goal in mind, you are already talking about body recomposition. You might not know the term, but you certainly know the goal. And what that really means at its most basic level is changing your body's ratio of muscle to fat. So we're wanting less body fat and more lean muscle mass. And in my view, anyone that has a weight loss goal really should be focusing more on body recomposition. So when I look at this from an aesthetics perspective, most people think the scale goes down, I'll be happier with how I look. But what that often actually means is that you might just be a smaller version of your current self, but it does not guarantee leaner or toned or stronger. Instead of just focusing on weight loss, we should really be thinking about how we can lose fat whilst at least maintaining our lean mass. That is the bit that makes you look toned. But not only is it the best goal, in my view, for aesthetics, but it's also going to be a much better goal for your overall health and performance. I'm a big fan of Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. If you don't follow her, you should immediately go and do that. And she talks about how muscle is the organ of longevity. And essentially, how having more muscle mass on your body can be a positive indicator of living a longer and more healthy life in general. So muscle is going to protect you against falls and injuries as you get older, as you age. It's going to help you to remain independent. It's going to protect you against things like osteoporosis and sarcopenia, essentially all of the things that you associate with frailty. And it's going to give you a lovely, healthy boost of your metabolism. So the more muscle mass you have on your frame, the more calories you will burn at complete rest. Before you get carried away, that doesn't mean you can just eat hundreds more calories and not gain any fat because you've added a few kilos of muscle, but it does make a difference. So moving on from why I think body recomposition should be the goal for anyone who wants to improve their physique, let's talk about how you actually do it. And there are lots and lots of people out there talking about this, and the way in which you approach body recomposition is going to be different depending on where your start point is. When we think about losing fat and building muscle at the same time, this actually is possible, but only for a certain group or certain groups of people. So when we think about being able to do this effectively, you're probably going to need to fall into one of these camps. You need to be relatively new to lifting, probably training less than a year. But actually, I've seen some really good results with people who have maybe been lifting 2 or 3 years, but with that approach to lifting, they've been quite sporadic. They haven't necessarily followed a structured plan. They haven't really been applying progressive overload or training with that close proximity to failure. Those people really do still fall into that new lifter category. So it's not necessarily just about the time that you've spent lifting. It's more about how you have been lifting. Someone returning to lifting after a long break is also a good candidate for that simultaneous fat loss and muscle building. So a good example is someone who's coming back postpartum, or someone who's maybe dealing with a long-term injury. Maybe they've broken a bone, they've had to take a few months out of the gym. Those types of instances are also going to be great candidates. Also, people in a bigger body, so with a higher percentage of body fat to lose, you realistically are going to find it much easier to lose fat whilst also building muscle. And then finally, if you're someone who's taking performance-enhancing drugs, or better known as steroids, if any of those camps apply to you, good news. You're going to find it relatively easier to lose fat and build muscle concurrently. So does that mean that it's just not possible for anyone else? Not quite. It's just that the process will be slower, like a lot slower. So let's say you're someone who's been lifting for a couple of years, you're not taking steroids, you're not returning from a long training break, and you don't have proportionately high levels of body fat. You absolutely can still go through that process of body recomposition. You're just going to have to be a little more patient and a little more structured with how you do it. This is where you might need to cycle through a few phases of a good amount of time at maintenance, followed by short fat loss phases. Now, how long each cycle lasts is going to be completely dependent on the person, where your training experience is, how much body fat you have to lose, and what your genetic potential is to build muscle in the first place. But it might look something like this. So really, we're looking at 6 months plus of that maintenance phase, lifting heavy, prioritizing protein, taking recovery seriously, training close to failure, and eating in your maintenance range. My client, pictured here, is a fantastic example of this. We actually spent 9 months at maintenance, focusing on building as much muscle as we possibly could. Then you might enter a short, sharp fat loss phase, maybe 2 or 3 months. The only thing that changes here is your level of calories. So we are still training as hard as we possibly can and prioritizing that protein in our diet. But it's just that our calorie level is going to be a little lower to help us lose that body fat whilst maintaining the muscle that we have. And really, the training and the protein are the things that are going to help you do that. You might want to repeat that cycle a few times until you get to your desired body composition. But truthfully, you have to spend that time at maintenance in order to get that lean or toned physique that you're looking for. Here's that same client again, 8 weeks into a deficit, looking incredible. Now, this physique would not have happened if it wasn't for the time we spent here. In terms of my own journey personally, I probably spent the best part of 5 years at maintenance, focusing on all of those things I've just mentioned. And then just a few months back, went into a cut to reveal the muscle mass that I'd been building and working so hard on. As I say, you can repeat that cycle as many times as you like, but really the longer you spend at maintenance, the better your results are going to be. I also wanted to talk about whether you need to be in a surplus or not, or go through kind of a bulk in order to get some really great results. Now, in my view, it is not necessary to eat in a surplus. For most people, there might be a couple of really edge cases. So if you're someone who is a professional bodybuilder, you're going into competition. You've got an off season where you've basically got a certain amount of time to pack on as much muscle as you can before going into a much longer, much more extreme in most cases, deficit to reveal that. So it's kind of the extreme end of that body recomposition journey. And unless you're standing up on a stage and being judged for how much muscle to fat you have, I don't think it is necessary to go through that bulking cycle. The only other example I can think of is if you are truly an advanced lifter. So say you've been training for over 5 years, you are super consistent with your training, your intensity never drops off. You've got all of the fundamentals absolutely nailed, and you don't mind the idea of putting on some body fat in the pursuit of eventually revealing it through a fat loss phase. But I would honestly say for everyone else, like general population, normal people, maintenance does a bloody good job at building that muscle mass. You just have to be a little bit more patient. So the reason I don't think it's needed really is because if you just took your average person who maybe trains 3 times a week, wants to look and feel a bit better, but has a really busy life outside of just the gym, and actually there are lots of things going on that maybe take more of a priority for them, which really is my client base, putting them in an intentional surplus over an extended period of time without all of those fundamentals absolutely dialed in that I've just spoken about, all that's going to lead to is putting on body fat. Even if you were to clean bulk, right? Like eat just predominantly whole foods and really take care of the nutrition that you're taking in, that does not stop a surplus being a surplus. At the end of the day, yes, you might build muscle a little bit more quickly, but avoiding putting on any body fat is literally impossible. So I really don't see the need to put your Gen Pop person into a surplus just in the pursuit of building a bit more muscle. It often leaves them feeling less happy with their physique and giving up on that process altogether. So whether you fall into any of those camps I mentioned at the beginning or not, The way that you approach body recomposition looks different in terms of the timeline and the phases you need to go through, but the fundamentals remain the same. Those are lift weights. You can't do this without it. You need progressive, structured strength training. Think 3 to 4 times a week, upper, lower, or full body splits, add weights or reps over time, and train like you mean it. You need to eat enough protein. If you want to build or keep your muscle, you are going to need to prioritize it in your diet, especially during a fat loss phase. So we want to aim for roughly 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. So simple maths, I'm 60 kilos, I'm going to need at least 120 grams of protein. You also need to take your recovery seriously. So sleep, stress management, rest days, they all matter. Muscle is built when you recover, not when you're smashing yourself in the gym 7 days a week. The last thing I wanted to touch on is the scales and why they might mess with your head a little bit during body recomposition. So this is particularly relevant to the people that are looking to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. When you're going through that process, the scales may not drop as quickly as you would like them to. Now, this is where people can panic and think about quitting. I would absolutely suggest you do not. The scale cannot tell the difference between a kilo of muscle and a kilo of fat, but your mirror or progress pictures or the way your jeans fit definitely can. So make sure you're tracking your progress in other ways in addition to the scales. So progress pictures, track your lifts, make sure they're going up as much as they possibly can, seeing that strength improve over time. Look at how your clothes fit. How are you feeling energy-wise, mood-wise? All of those things really count when we're thinking about that body recomp. So look, I'm not going to dress it up. Body recomposition is the long game. You do not get that instant gratification that you get by dieting for a couple of weeks in a super extreme way and seeing you've lost 3 kilos. It's not going to give you that 6-week transformation. It's just not how it works. But by embracing it, you will achieve that strong, lean, confident look. So if you're done with chasing weight loss and want to actually change the way your physique looks, body recomposition is going to be your next move. You can drop your questions below and you'll find my email in the caption for coaching inquiries. Thanks again for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Love you, bye.